Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
Near Lake Merced in the early morning hours of September 13th, 1859, two men squared off to resolve their conflict concerning the American Civil War. As guns were drawn in what is now known as California's last duel, David C. Broderick's gun misfired prior to taking aim. David Terry, the man who requested the duel, slowly raised his gun and fired into the chest of his adversary. These men were two of California's most important political figures. Broderick, an Irishman from New York, had arrived during the gold rush, and at the age of 37 had become a United States Senator. Terry arrived during that same period. He was a quick-tempered Southerner from Texas who was now a state Supreme Court justice. Terry supported slavery. Broderick did not. 3 days after the duel, the United States Senator, David C. Broderick, died of his wounds near the mouth of the Golden Gate.
My name is Stefan Baumann and welcome to The Grand View. Today we're going to visit Golden Gate National Recreation Area. This park is actually composed of several different parks that in 1972 all came together to form one magnificent park. This park is the largest urban national park in the world. Later on in this episode, I find this secluded place in this urban park and capture it on canvas. So come along with me as we explore this magnificent park called Golden Gate National Recreation Area.
Northern California's geologic history is amazing. Ask any geologist and they will just make your head spin trying to describe what happened here. Redwoods themselves as a species have been growing on Earth for millions of years, and there were once over 40 different species of redwoods. The particular species you see here is the Sequoia sempervirens, and it is a temperate species. It loves really mild climates. Here at Muir Woods, we get lots of rain during the wintertime, lots of fog during the summertime. It never gets too hot or too cold. During the last ice ages, other species of redwoods that couldn't survive that kind of dramatic climate change to cold were either scraped away by ice or couldn't handle the cold temperatures. Here along the coast of California, the temperatures were moderated by the Pacific Ocean. The glaciers actually never reached the coast of California here, and the temperatures weren't nearly as cold, so the trees were able to survive. And as recently as 40,000 years ago, the redwoods were found much further south, but as our climate has slowly warmed following those last ice ages, the range of the redwood has moved northward. As for this particular grove, there are trees in here that are over 1,200 years old, which is still young for redwood trees. They can grow for over 2,000 years. Why are our trees not older? Maybe we had a catastrophic event here 1,200 years ago that burned some of the older trees. Maybe our trees are genetically designed to not get much older. Just like humans, sometimes we live till we're 40 and sometimes we live till we're 120. Trees have the same sort of genetic diversity. So today redwoods are only found on the northern coast of California on about a 450-mile long stretch between just south of Monterey and up north into one county of Oregon, and only within about 40 miles of the ocean, because the Pacific Ocean marine layer creates a fog belt in the summertime that helps keep these trees moist enough to survive the dry season that we get in this area. We have Mediterranean climate. We get 6 months of summertime when we get virtually no rain. The fog is very important to help these trees survive. Near the creek, we found something very unusual: owlets. Northern spotted owls are actually nesting here at Muir Woods, where we have the southernmost pairs of this endangered species nesting here. And one of the pairs had a couple owlets hatched this spring, and a very unusual occurrence. They actually came out during the day yesterday for our visitors to be able to see. They were hopping along near the creek, probably trying out their wings for the first time. They're probably only about 4 to 6 weeks old. They have some of their mature feathers, but mostly a lot of fuzz on their head. A really wonderful experience for our visitors to come out and see a rare and endangered animal in its natural habitat. And for us, it's a way for us to know that we are doing a good job protecting the forest, because spotted owls will only be seen in a healthy old-growth forest. It's ancient, and all that implies it's so old, and it's awe-inspiring, and it's mysterious. And because of all these things, I feel like I need to respect it.
This became the northernmost outpost of the Spanish Empire on the west coast of the United States. And by 1797, the Presidio had been established over by the harbor entrance. And the Spaniards looked for this anchorage over here in the lee of a point of land along the northern shore, and they built a small gun battery here. And that was the first of 4 generations of seacoast defense that grew up on this site. The American Army came in 1863, built this gun battery over here, what the Americans called Black Point. But the Americans built a battery on the leeward side at the time of the Civil War to protect the most strategically important harbor on the west coast of the Americas, and also to protect the gold shipments that came from California gold mines and went a long way to financing and securing the good credit of the North, of the Union during the Civil War. Everyone makes jokes about Confederate money. No offense to my Southern friends, but the reason that they don't make jokes about Union money was because of the gold that came from California. And Alcatraz became kind of the stopper in the cork. If a warship succeeded by its own power, by the wind, by the fog or the dark, the tides, and running past the guns of Fort Point, which were numerous for one reason, because they weren't individually that accurate, not just Fort Point, mind you, but the guns of that time. A ship, if you think about it, running past Fort Point and coming into the Golden Gate is going to be coming right at Alcatraz. The Alcatraz was converted to a maximum security federal penitentiary. It used to be a military post, a fort in the bay. It used to be a military prison. But the military prison was changed into a high-profile maximum security prison for America's most notorious criminals. So you've got 4 generations of seacoast artillery right here on this one spot within a few hundred feet of one another at one of the many military posts that eventually became part of Golden Gate National Recreation Area. I think the words that sum it up best are really part of its title, the Golden Gate. The Golden Gate really means a lot to people. It's a symbol of coming to California by sea. It's a symbol of the gold rush. And the Golden Gate also means the beauty of the scenic headlands, the natural beaches, the wild open space. The magic of this place is firmly based upon the magic of the Golden Gate.
The Ohlone people in this area were a group who had permanent dwellings. I mean, you can ask anybody who moves to the San Francisco Bay region, why do you live here today? We have a very comfortable, mild climate. Rarely is it very warm. We get 2-3 days during the summer that are somewhat unbearable, and then we get a few days of winter cold. And so it's a very comfortable climate where people did not move around seasonally. So in some of our major village locations had permanent dwellings, and during what would be off season, as it were, rainy season or the hot summer season, it might be that the older people and the children stayed there, and the younger crowd went following whatever resources it was. So during maybe, say, the fall time, which is the time for harvesting the acorns in the hills, the younger crowd who would be able to do that would leave the village and come up to the hills virtually where we're at right now and harvest the acorns from the oak tree, and then also would go hunting. But they would go back to the permanent villages. So our villages, which also had fresh water from the springs in the ground in this area, you could live there year round. We went to my grandmother, who was alive at the time, my father's mother, and so she was in her mid to late 70s, about Dad's age at this point, and says, what do we do? And her first thing was, don't go. The island is cursed, it's not a safe place, and she meant in the sense of a safe psychological, spiritual place, don't go there. So in pursuing that, was asking, Grandma, well, somebody's gonna ask me, why? You just can't say, you know, there's a curse on the island and I can't go there. Well then, Grandma comes and shares a story that at some point way back when, and again, how do you judge dates or time? Just way back when is a long time ago, far away from here. Grandma said that somebody of the people had gone to the island and had removed a stone. And until that stone is replaced, there is chaos in the world. And it's not a good thing to go to that place because that's the center from where all this not good energy is generated now. And I know there are other Indian folks, other tribal groups in the area, they share a story about Diamond Island, and they talk about the missing diamond, whether it's a charm stone, whether it's a crystal or something like that, it needs to be brought back, which is just a wonderful situation when you talk about when we put things in place, when the world will be in order, chaos will end.
Well, we spent a couple days here at Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and I found a wonderful little vista that I think will make for a great painting. This composition has a paved road, which we're going to turn into a pathway. Because of the elements of the weather, we're going to have an opportunity to really take a look at how to paint fog and the different effects that it has in our composition. So without further ado, let's get painting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze out cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, and cad yellow light. And I'm going to take a brush that I'm going to use for my sketch, and I'm going to mix these three colors together and create a neutral color or a black. Now this composition also has these wonderful angles. I'm going to bring these angles through the center of my composition. And there's this wonderful angle that goes into the center of my composition where we're going to lay the road down. And I'm going to make sure that the bottom part of my composition is in the bottom third of my canvas. Now in the background, right now it's all covered with fog, and I slightly can tell that there's a horizontal line that is a meadow in the background. And a slight line is making its way through the fog of a hillside that's coming down into my cypress tree. This is wonderful because it's an angle going into my main area of my composition. Now there's some smaller cypress trees. I'm going to put that on one of my thirds. This hillside is covered with wonderful bushes that make their way down to the roadside. And I'm going to create a little bit more drama in my composition by making the slope a little bit steeper. That way that we have these wonderful lines. We have this wonderful line leading to the center of my composition, this road that will lead to the center of my composition. There's an element of moisture that's in the air, and it's causing my palette to get very wet. When this happens, it's easier to mix with a palette knife. And consequently, when you mix it with a knife, you can really work the paint in. You want to create a nice pile of this color because there's so much in our composition. Use nice bold brush strokes. And as we slowly come to the edge of the canvas, we're going to slowly add a little darker variation of gray. We want to create depth in our fog. And when you work with a limited palette, all you need to do is just work these colors together. Now I'm taking my lighter fog color and painting around my trees. I want to try to keep my darks transparent, so I don't want to cover a lot of my dark for my cypress trees. Very carefully working around my tree, you can slowly see the hillside just coming and going in the fog. And as that effect happens out in nature, I capture it on my canvas. I'm very carefully trying to pick up the subtlety of color. These bushes are a little darker than my hillside, and I'm carefully going around my bushes with these brush strokes. Nice little bright green dabs of paint. In the distant hillside, there's these wonderful little bushes. I'm going to paint them with the same color that I just used on the bushes in the foreground. What I'm doing is actually mixing these bushes into my gray that I use for my fog. Short little strokes. Now with the background bushes done, I'm ready to start working on my foreground. I'm going to switch to a fan brush. Now what I want to do is recreate the texture that I see in front of me. An oil painting should be created from dark to light. A watercolor is created from light to dark. But in oil painting, you want to make sure you get the darks in first. One beautiful effect with dark tones is that they are transparent. This is the effect that Bierstadt and Moran used to use, is that you can actually see through the darks onto the canvas. Notice how I'm just flipping the brush strokes up into my bushes in the background. Now I'm going to add white to my color. This white is the white that I used for the atmosphere, not white by itself. Now some of these bushes have a little bit more red in them, and some of them a little bit more green. I'm changing the colors as I go along. As the bushes come closer, they get larger. And in between the bushes, there's some grasses. And we want to use the same fan brush, but just lightly pull up on the fan brush. Remember what I said earlier, that my central focal point is towards the center of my painting. This is the brightest area of my painting. Even though that there's not a lot of light out, I'm creating a little bit stronger effect of light in this area. In a scene like this, you have hundreds of different types of grasses. So pay very close attention to the subtleties. These subtleties are actually what sculpt the painting. There's also little tiny flowers. And with just the corner of my fan brush and some yellow, I'm going to put those in. Now with all the detail done on the left side of my canvas, I'm ready to start the road. We want to create some energy of this road going downhill. And we do that by just really bold strokes, leading the viewer down into our composition. Smaller strokes in the distance, and again, brighter in the distance. Switch to a smaller brush and create some shadows in the rocks on this dirt road. And then go back in and highlight the shadows. Start off with the dark first and then put the highlights on. Now with my bold brush strokes in, I'm going to just take the same brush and work it up into my greenery and flatten my pathway a little bit. Now with my road done, I'm ready to concentrate on the foreground on the right hand side of the painting. The grasses are just short little strokes upward. Go back and forth between dark and light colors, and just like with the other side, there's a lot of variation of grasses. Now with all that done, I'm ready to start working on these wonderful bushes in the foreground. Just use the corner of the fan brush, laying the base of these bushes. The tops of these bushes have little gray flowers on them. They're kind of a cream colored gray. And these bushes have some brown tones. Now I'm going to switch to a palette knife and scratch in some of the detail. I'm slowly picking up just a pattern of grasses laying down. And a few of these grasses are long and go right up past the bushes. Now with all of that done, I'm going to put down my palette knife and I'm going to pick up my fan brush again, and we're going to start painting the background trees. Use just a corner of the fan brush and work it out towards the end of the tree. Limb by limb, all the detail. Notice how the limbs fray out at the end to different branches. Very interesting patterns. Short little strokes put in the trunk first. There's some trees a little further down that are a little grayer. Add a little bit of white to this color. Create a gray value. Soften the edges because we don't want to bring a lot of attention to this tree in the distance. Now with all the darks in for the base of my trees, I'm ready to start putting in the highlights. Not too many highlights on the top of the tree. Remember, we want to create the illusion of light behind the tree. Now I'm going to switch brushes, pick up some of my gray from the background fog, put in some little bird holes. Just to give a little feeling of air peeking through my tree. Now with my highlights done, I'm ready to sign the painting and conclude this wonderful day at Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grandview by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein Air Magazine, for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com